You ever wonder how civilization sticks around for literally thousands of years? It's not just luck, right? It's about having a plan. And in ancient India, that plan was this incredibly complex social blueprint. So let's dive in and really unpack the structures that shaped one of the world's oldest and still thriving civilizations.
Right off the bat, this quote from the Arthashastra just hits you. It's from this ancient playbook on how to run a state, and it tells you everything you need to know. The whole system? It wasn't built on power for power's sake. It was built on this profound ideal of duty. The king wasn't just some guy on the throne. He was seen as the #1 servant of his people.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the texts that lay out this whole blueprint. Then we'll dig into the pillars of power, the social fabric itself. Take a look at the world of women, see how knowledge was pursued, and wrap it all up with the legacy that's still with us today.
Okay, so where are we getting all this from? I mean, how do we even know what this ancient blueprint looked like? Well, it's all thanks to this incredible treasure trove of literature, written over centuries and centuries, that basically gives us a window right into their world.
The best way to think about these texts is like different pieces of a giant puzzle. You've got the Vedas, that's your philosophical foundation. Then you have the epic stories, the Ramayana and Mahabharata, which are all about teaching values through these grand narratives. The Arthashastra? That's the super practical how-to manual for running a kingdom. And then the Smritis are like the law books for day-to-day life. When you put them all together, you get this stunningly detailed picture of their society.
So let's start at the very top of that structure. At the center of it all, holding everything together, was the king. He was seen as the absolute pillar of the social order.
And get this, being king was no walk in the park. According to the Arthashastra, the ideal king's daily schedule was absolutely grueling. We're talking maybe 4.5 hours of sleep a night. This wasn't about kicking back and enjoying the luxury. No way. The whole point was to keep the ruler constantly busy, constantly engaged, and totally accessible. It was a system designed to fight off corruption and laziness. I mean, from dawn till dusk and well into the night, it was a non-stop commitment to running the state.
So what this all tells us is that leadership was a high-stakes game. The texts lay it out in black and white. You could be a just king, and if you were, you'd be respected, you'd bring prosperity to your people. Or you could be an unjust king, and if you were, you'd be hated. Even being too soft could get you held in contempt. At the end of the day, you'd lose the loyalty of your people, and the whole kingdom could come crashing down.
And a king's power wasn't just about having the biggest army. It had to be sacred. It needed a kind of divine stamp of approval. And that's where these huge, elaborate public ceremonies came in. Things like the Rosh Hashanah, when a new king was crowned, or the legendary Ashwamedha, the horse sacrifice. These weren't just parties. They were massive public spectacles designed to show everyone, hey, this guy's authority comes from the gods. It really cemented his right to rule.
Okay, so we've talked about the king. Now let's zoom out and look at the society he ruled over. You can think of the whole social fabric as being woven from two main threads. On one hand, you have the big picture framework of Varna, and on the other, you have the super-personal, intimate circle of the family.
So the ancient texts lay out this idealized social model, right? It's called the Varna system, and it has 4 main tiers. Each group had a specific job to do for society to function. You have the Brahmanas, the priests and scholars, the Kshatriyas, the rulers and warriors, the Vaishyas, the merchants and farmers, and the Shudras, the laborers and service providers. Now, it's really important to remember, this was the ideal blueprint. The on-the-ground reality was way more complex.
So you might be thinking, okay, that's the big picture's social structure. But how did that actually affect a regular person's life? Like their family, their personal choices? It's a great question. And one of the clearest ways we see this in action is through the rules that govern marriage and family.
And this is where a concept called Gotra comes in. The easiest way to think of it is as a clan or a lineage. Every family had one, and it traced your ancestry all the way back to some ancient sage. And here is the #1 rule. You could not, under any circumstances, marry someone from the same Gotra. So there you have it, a perfect example of a huge social idea directly shaping one of the most personal decisions you could ever make.
All right, let's switch gears and focus on the world of women in this blueprint. And this is a really important topic, because it's not a simple, straightforward story at all. It's incredibly dynamic, full of contradictions, and it changed a lot over the centuries.
If you look way back in the early Vedic period, women held a really respected place in society. I mean, they were involved in important rituals, some were even composing sacred hymns. But then, things started to change. A decline began.
In the later Vedic period, their public roles started to get smaller. This trend pretty much continued, and while they did get some property rights later on, things like early marriage for girls started to become the norm. By the time we hit the medieval period, things had deteriorated even more for many.
But, and this is a really big but, that's just one side of the coin. That's the general trend. The historical record is also jam-packed with stories of incredible, exceptional women who completely bucked those trends and wielded serious power and influence.
I'm talking about absolute powerhouses like Gargi Vachaknavi, a philosopher who went toe-to-toe in public debates with the most famous male sages of her day, or scholars like Maitreyi. And then you've got actual rulers, like Queen Dita of Kashmir, who ran the show for 50 years, and Razia Sultan, who took the throne of Delhi herself. It just goes to show you, no matter what the prevailing social rules were, powerful and brilliant women were always a force to be reckoned with.
So you have this incredibly rich and complex culture. How do you make sure it gets passed on from one generation to the next? Well, the answer lies in their education system, which was super sophisticated and put a massive emphasis on the pursuit of knowledge.
At the heart of it all was something called the Gurukula system. It was pretty simple, really. Students, or shishyas, would go and live with their teacher, their guru. And this was so much more than just hitting the books. It was about developing the whole person. By living with and serving their guru, they learned discipline, morality, and life skills right alongside their formal lessons.
And over time, these small gurukulas evolved into these massive centers of learning, basically some of the world's first great universities. We're talking about legendary places like Taxila, which is famous for medicine, or Nalanda, a huge monastic university that was known all over the world. These places were magnets for scholars from across Asia, turning ancient India into a true global hub for knowledge.
And if you want a little proof of just how prestigious these places were, think about this. The famous Chinese scholar and pilgrim Huentang, a brilliant mind in his own right, traveled all the way to India in the 7th century and spent 4 years studying at Nalanda. That tells you everything about the kind of international reputation these universities had.
Okay, so we've walked through the pillars of power, the social fabric, and the pursuit of knowledge. Let's bring it all home. What's the lasting legacy of this ancient blueprint? What parts of it are still with us?
When you step back and look at the whole thing, this incredibly detailed blueprint, with its ideas about leadership, its social structure, its focus on family duty, and its deep respect for knowledge, it created something astonishingly durable. It was a framework that gave this civilization the strength to last for thousands and thousands of years.
And that really leaves us with one big final thought. This isn't just a story about the distant past. All these ideas about the duties of a leader, about the structure of a community, the ongoing debates about social roles, that deep, deep value placed on knowledge, these aren't just artifacts in a museum. They're living ideas. So the question I want to leave you with is this: how can you see the echoes of this ancient blueprint still shaping our world today?